Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the barn door restoration. Last episode I finished off these inner frame panels. Actually might have a small adjustment I need to make to those. I'll cover that when I talk about next episode. So this episode I got the two front frame rails complete, also the front outriggers. I need those when this assembly welds up. So these frame rails, they join in the middle. Because the front frame rails are parallel and the rear spread out, and they just put a welded joint. They're quite thin metal. It's a 1.9 millimeter. There's quite a bit of variance in it though. Like these flanges are much thinner because the way it was stamped has stretched the metal. So about 1.9 millimeter, just 14 gauge. The few things to note. Well, on the driver's side, there is a bulge in it where the clutch pedal comes up through, and a reinforcement strip, and it's spot welded in. There's also a reinforcement plate and a notch at the bottom for the bottom of the steering box. On this barn door, there's a reinforcement plate here. The earlier ones didn't have this. Probably around 53 or maybe late 52 they added this. I'm really not sure when it added. There's also a 3 millimeter thick rectangular plate under here that's welded in. I'm not sure if that's on the originals or just on these later ones with the reinforcement plate. So there's also this the brackets for the front beam mount. Well, normally these would be welded to the center section, and when the frame rails are put on, they're plug welded on. But because these were in good shape, I didn't want to mess with the plug welds, so I'll actually drill my inner panels and plug weld into this. So it'll be a little different than original, but it shouldn't show. I should be able to smooth those plug welds off so they don't show. So I had roughly rebuilt these a few episodes back. I had to replace the frame rails. They were in bad shape. They had a lot of really thin spots, deep pitting, and then they were cracked and rusted almost through where the reinforcement plate in the middle was. So those rails really weren't worth saving, so I put those in new. And then the where they curve up back here is another spot where they tend to rust. So these are in very bad shape, lots of holes through them. So I rebuilt this section on both of them. And then the front section, both had that one's a completely new piece. This one actually I had a piece donated to me, a donor piece that had enough parts for me to rebuild that, because there's so much missing and there's so much thin stuff on it that there wasn't much here to actually recover. So from the parts I was able to rebuild this. This time around I just had to add a lot of details. Well, I had to finish off the welds because I hadn't really smoothed them off before. I had a lot of holes to drill in this one. On these, there's holes on the left side frame rail where the rear brake line goes, and they actually are big enough for a bolt with a nut. Or later splits, they just tapped right into the frame. These had a nut and bolt. There's also some nuts I had to weld in. On a barn door, the front beam bolts in here, and it has a brace that comes back with 3 bolts on each side. So I put the T-nuts in there. Now I actually welded those on. The spot welder was not going to be heavy enough to weld those in. Plus, if they break loose, it will be encased in the frame, so that would be kind of a bad time. There is T-nuts, or one original T-nut up here, and that actually had a bead weld across it. So, and spot welded. So I'm assuming at some point they had these break loose, so they spot welded and then run a bead weld. So what I did back here is probably similar to what they did anyway on the originals. The smaller T-nuts, I actually drilled those from the back side and plug welded them. I had spot welded them on the inner panels with thinner metal, and they spot welded really well. But on the 14 gauge, they weren't strong enough. I could spot weld them on, but I put vice grips on them, I could snap them back off. So that's why I drilled from the back side and plug welded them in. So they look like they're spot welded on, but they're actually plug welded. I think if you had a good, powerful spot welder, it wouldn't be a problem. But A few other things. Um, there's some wire ties. So there's wire ties on the inside of this frame where the harness comes up through. So there's 2 wire ties in there and 2 up in there. And this side has them for the horn wire. There's a wire tie right here for the horn wire goes under. And 2 on this side for the speedometer cable. As the speedometer cable comes down and goes out through the center of the spindle and reads the speed off this wheel. Actually, I'll just pop this off. There we go. It's a bit awkward. So the wire ties, they go in here, and all they are is just thin metal, and you just bend the tabs over the wire. I had a cover off, I think, a washing machine that was just the right thickness of metal and kind of springy, so it actually works really well. So there's 3 on this side. Now these are smaller. These are 10 millimeter wide and 50 millimeters long. The ones on that side for the harness are actually 12 millimeters wide, 60 millimeters long. So slightly different. And get this around here. So we can see the 3 nuts that are welded in here. And then there's 2 nuts here. The front one's actually an original one. This one I added because I patched this piece. And the front bumper bolts, there's one up in here. The other one is actually a hex nut welded in to this reinforcement plate. That side I had to add 2 new T-nuts for the bumper. Also, when I put this tab in here, the spot welder was not going to have enough strength, so I actually plug welded these in also. And probably when I put anything I weld to the frame, I'm going to plug weld. And I can do it in such a way that they won't show. I can do it from the back side. The spot welders, although good for the thinner metal, I don't trust the strength. It's just not heavy enough to weld this thicker steel. So I guess that covers about everything I did. I uploaded the drawings for this to GrabCAD, both frame rails and all the parts. Something I should mention is sometimes I'll make revisions to the drawings and re-upload them. The file name changes, file number changes, and I also put a note in the description of what changed. So next episode, it'll get kind of exciting here. It's going to be welding all this back together. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm hoping I can get all this assembled in one episode. We'll see how it goes. So the issue I do have, though, is the point data I collected from the frame using the laser system and the point data I collected from the upper body seem to be shifted by 2 millimeters. And I'm not sure what happened there. It's possible my 0 point was off because I did the body before removing off the frame, and I did the frame after removing the body, so it was 2 different setups. So it's possible I had the 0 point off, in which case everything's fine, I'll just shift it. But it's also possible that I mismeasured the bulkhead. And if I did, that means that the bulkhead's going to move 2 millimeters, which means I might have to make a slight adjustment to those panels, but not enough to bother them too much. So the good thing is that my 64 bus has exactly the same dimension from the rear torsion beam to the bulkhead. And the side panels align with the bulkhead the same way. So I can take some accurate measurements off of that and see where I went wrong. If my point data is in fact shifted, or if I got the bulkhead wrong. 2 millimeters probably wouldn't make much difference. There's a lot of variation in these chassis. But because I'm creating drawings that other people might use, I really kind of like to have it exact. So I have to check that before I actually weld anything. So next episode is start assembling, so I'm quite excited for that to happen. Keep watching for some video of this work and some details of the video of the parts. And thanks for the comments, I appreciate them, and thanks for watching.